All right, welcome back to episode number 32 of the Perform podcast. So today, I thought I'd do just a quick little weekly PD presentation just on something that we did a little while ago on our physical preparation or physical development blocks, which will happen before your team training session. So it's obviously something that's been highlighted a lot more over the last couple of years in terms of the value of those first 10 to 15 minutes in your session. But it definitely is a massive window of opportunity, especially in semi-professional settings where we don't have the same level or exposure across the board of gym exposure, et cetera, and your 10, 15 minutes before training can actually be a valuable stimulus to a population that don't have a lot of stimulus within their week. So it's a short little window. It's a window that you can progress and build on over time and get better and better at. But it's definitely something of a fair bit of value. So just like I said, so you aim for 10 to 15 minutes a week, do that twice a week for 33 weeks. And this is just on average in terms of a pre-season and in-season. You've got a massive volume accumulation of training. It is a very much like a microdose kind of setup, and you're obviously relative to the training stimuluses that you're trying to achieve within the actual given sessions. But it's a huge opportunity to try and mitigate injury risk, to try and get a bit of a potent stimulus or a relative stimulus on the body. And then also, which is probably the most important part, is potentiate the actual session that you're doing in itself. So the whole goal of our sessions is the actual tactical element and the execution of those side of things with the physical qualities to match that. So being able to have that base and then being able to have the athletes not only physically but mentally ready for that training stimulus, and then that transfer into game day is obviously, it's a nice little stepping stone to working together. So from a questions perspective, when you're writing your sessions, this is a couple that we've just written down. So have you decreased the risk of injury? So is there elements where you identify your sport, you look at the potential risks? So I work a lot of rugby, so you're looking at things like hamstrings, calves, knee ligaments and shoulders. That's kind of your big ones. So in the actual session, have I prepared the session to minimize the risk of those injuries? And then also, have I put in potentially a stimulus for those who aren't doing soft tissue work outside of the gym to help prepare those tissues for the demands that are going to happen in games and training and things? Have you created a training stimulus? And obviously this is very, very, like I said, very dependent on the individual. We have athletes that are training in here and they're getting soft tissue management work done. So loading of calves, loading of hammies, loading of groins. So when they go down to their team trainings, the warm-up's probably not a stimulus. It's just a bit of an ideal setup to then for what they're going to do in the later stages of that warm-up to be a stimulus. But then there's some individuals where they're just playing local sport, they're not in the gym consistently, and then when they do hamstring exercises, calf exercises, range of motion work, hip mobility, whatever it might be, these are kind of actual potent things that are going to actually have an effect. Have you improved their physical development? Because there's a window there to develop on certain qualities. And then have you set up the session for the best success? So if you can answer those 4 questions with a yes, then you know your physical development's heading in the right direction, your physical development block. So from a prepare perspective, you're looking at the mobility side of things. So looking at common limitations, and there's differences from the pre-season to the in-season. There'll be certain elements of what's getting beaten up the most. Is it a lot of the hips from change of direction loads? Is it hamstring range of motion limitations because of the high-speed exposures in pre-season? Is there overload elements? It could be overload weeks or just overloads for that individual because of their chronic loads are sporadic, or the group's chronic loads are a bit sporadic kind of thing. And then the session demand. So if I've got a contact session versus if I've got a session with a lot of high speed versus I've got a session with a lot of change direction, I want mobility. So if I'm change direction, I'm trying to get a bit more access into internal rotation, even external rotation. If it's a lot of high speed running, so I'm making sure I'm good hip flexion, good hip extension, and looking at those elements. Then from a stability standpoint, can we put some stimulus into ankle foot stability, pelvic stability, shoulder stability, and those pieces that'll help prepare the session for what they're to be exposed to, or Same thing if there's not much training stimulus in the gym from a stability element. We can do floating heel variations. We can do balancing with partner pushes. We can do hip aeroplanes. We can do some people call them like arabesques or walks or whatever, like elements like that as well. Injury risk areas and tissue capacity, so like hamstrings, calves, etc. And the common theme with the physical development blocks that we've got is this ability to progress throughout the season. So ideally, if you have the same group and you've got the same stimulus week to week, there's ways that you can progress the demands. So there is progressive overload elements, for example, like your hamstring. So like, for example, our group are up to hamstring stimulus where we're doing that partner overcoming pushes. So in a long lever position, legs out straight, other legs in the air, and the partner's pushing down on the hips to actually get more of a stimulus. We've started with just hamstring bridges, we've done hamstring holds, we've done hamstring marches, hamstring ISO catches, and there's a multitude of different ways that we can add variability and demand and overload and preparation to the hamstrings. For some of the guys that are doing GHD hip extensions or loaded hip ISO holds and stuff like that in the gym, it's not a stimulus, but it's just a good preparation for what they're doing. For those that aren't, it can be a bit of a stimulus for them as well. Calves, same thing, we can prep it. And then future loading areas as well. So trying to have that kind of potentiation thought process that in the phases in my preparation blocks, and this is obviously a bit more ideal if it's in the gym because we can get a bit more done, or even those 5 to 10 minutes before the session. Some people are lucky enough to have equipment to load up a little bit more. But if I'm heading in like in a pre-season where you're heading into higher volume blocks or higher, the change of direction exposure starts to increase or the contact load starts to increase, before I get to those areas, am I putting in preparation work to match that? So if I'm heading into a high collision block before the end of the preseason, am I putting in more demands through the shoulders from stability stuff, from mobility stuff, drop catches, from partner ISO squeezes and pushes and things like that, and like progressing the demand. So then when I get to that next bridge of contact, there's actually a bit of physical preparation there. And obviously that's going to come with just the contact and collision itself, building that over time. Next part's just like the progressional element. So this is a big one where it's like, and again, it's going to be tough for groups and you've got to be very sharp and very detailed and very well thought out. But ideally we're chasing little elements of progressions. So this physical development side of things, so thinking about like the actual physical quality and the technical quality. So you've got some of your running drills and things like that, or your plyometrics, and then when we get that base down packed, then from there we can add in complexity in terms of like multi-directional change plyometrics or reactive change of direction or whatever, plyometrics, whatever it might be, challenge versus partners, etc. So making sure we build up the intensity once there's like a bit of a general base, and progressive overload, and also like making sure it's technically sound before we do it. And then in this block, like having the goal of transfer. So in this bit, so I've done my preparation work, I've done my prep at the start, I'm heading into more plyometrics, technical running drills, etc. And you watch a lot of sports where they'll just go out and they'll just do the same A skips, B skips, 1, 2, 3s, and that's it. And it's like there's got to be some kind of physical, coordinative, cognitive challenge or progression in some sense. So we're actually challenging the tissues and challenging also the body. And then at the same time, that kind of removes the monotony of the session, of the preparation, and it creates that continuation of like fun, and there's something different, which is important when you get into 20, 30, 40 weeks of doing these kind of warm-ups and preps. But at the same time, you're adding progressional layers to what they're trying to achieve, and that's how we can see transfer, and that's kind of the idea is we can see the transfer if I'm getting them, if I'm creating a faster switch, if I'm improving the coordination or the separation between the hips and the trunk, and then I go into speed drills or curvature drills or skills of passing or whatever, and that's then having that opportunity to bridge that gap and transfer versus just doing A skips all the time and then hoping that maybe that'll transfer into faster speed, which is probably going to be a little bit unlikely. And then when you're looking at this progressional part, like break it down into your different pieces. So like my change direction, my plyometric or my technical drills are acceleration based if it's on an intensive day, or deceleration based if we've got a big, short, intensive stop-start kind of day. Same thing with like max velocity. If I'm doing my more extensive running kind of day, ideally having, if I've got a group and I can see 4 or 5 runners and they've got a big extension through the trunk, we've got this big backside flick, we've got poor front side. From there, then my drills might be more focused on creating more of a stacked rib cage, creating more front side mechanics, creating more like differences in that element, whatever it might be. But just having a bit more thought process around that. And then even from a collisional standpoint as well, like are we getting transfer? Could be acceleration, but even that side of things from the technical pieces. So that's even just like little progressional parts around like your wrestling, your little contact drills and stuff like that. So when you're doing these, just trying to have some kind of like screening per session. So like just double checking that this is actually transferring and making an effect. So it'll make more sense once you get to potentiation side of things, but just looking at like, I'm going to put in an A skit with my hands behind my head or with a trunk rotation for 1 or 2, 3 weeks. Am I seeing more change in mobility throughout the range of motion? Am I seeing hip square? Am I seeing good faster switches? And am I seeing a good coordination? And then from there, like a good transfer into the passing side of things. So just having that as a bit of a thought process. So each week, and that's kind of what we do for like our like potentiation side of things, is just like an actual like sprinting drill or max velocity drill or something. And all it takes is as a coach is just to pull your phone out. They're all going to do it in one line, which obviously constrains the rest periods as well, which means we can get better intensity. Just film my set and then just hold that there and they can all just sprint through. And then you just go at the end of your session, you look back through and go, all right, well, this individual, if say I've got a group of 20, 30 athletes and you're a local coach and you've only got so many resources, you're not there paid full time, but you can just record it, film it, they're all running through and you go, all right, I can see 2 or 3 big red flags. This person's got a massive limp on one side. This person's got a massive extension through the lower back and backside mechanics. And someone else has got like really poor hip extension or really poor reactivity through the floor. And then I can go, all right, I can then take that information. I can then message these guys and go, all right, you're going to add this at the start of your session. And then that's how you create that, am I reducing the risk of injury? And you're also questioning that transfer element. So by improving those elements, you're reducing their risk, but you're also improving their performance at the same time. So that's why it's also good at some point in your sessions and your warm-ups to have some kind of screening tool. So same thing, it could be axles, so it could be in lines of 4, could be a bit of a race. You're going to film from the side and then you're just going to watch them run through. You could see 1 or 2 people just can't get into deep knee flexion, can't get that good roll and transference and that good projection on the front side. So then for them, I might give them a little bit of extra stability work or ISO holds in that certain position. You could go back to your wall drills and all that kind of stuff. But what kind of transference or progressional stuff that I can put into their program before the session starts, that makes a difference as well. And then some kind of like potentiation. So you've got games and pieces like that. Nice and loud. But your games and things like that, but just some kind of potentiation. So with your potentiation, just trying to consider with the actual loading in the session. So is it a high intensity game? Is it a low intensity game? So like you can see the version here where like I've got like a bit of a passing drill. That's a low intensity game. So that could be something that's that can be something that's in a session where we're trying to require a bit of a lower load, but I'm trying to get a good energy and a good output from it. Can be that side of things. That can be early preseason where I'm not getting to those high speed exposures just yet. I'm still building, but I want to get some energy in the session. And then even elements of like skill demand as well. And then you've got pieces like this where it's like races where we can visually see wins, we can visually see changes. So from your races side of things, we do races in terms of like axles, sometimes like your max velocities, you change your direction side of things as well. So like a little change of direction races. And this is a good way that we can push intensity with all the preparation we've done before, with all the months of build up as well, and we can maintain intensity and maintain good quality stimulus while the season's going through and at different weeks and different times and things like that. So, and then with your potentiation as well, like I said, like trying to match it up with your theme. So trying to potentiate, if it's intensive running day, extensive running day, whether it's a collision day, whatever it might be, trying to match that up. So if it's more of a collision-based day, then we're going to have drills that are going to kind of get the energy up. Could be more of a wrestling drill into around the corner to a change direction race or something like that. Like little elements like that where you're going to create a bit of an energy potentiation and a mood change as well. Because that's also like a key piece where, yes, we're trying to prepare them physically, but you can see it where like those first 10, 15 minutes, if the energy's low, the session can be very shit and it can be very poor, and the actual coach's drills and what they're trying to achieve cannot get their effect, which can then have a snowball effect on the transfer. And so that can have a snowball effect on the success rate of the drills, which then influences the energy and the mood and the coaching feedback, whether it's positive or negative, which then changes the way they're feeling and the positive thought process about the team and how they're heading into the weekend. So that first part, as much as it's just like a warm-up, can be very valuable in terms of setting up the mood and the energy. And I think that's part of being a really skilled S&C coach, is being aware of that. So I might have my perfect session plan laid out, but then I can see as the guys come into the session, energy's a bit lower, mood's a bit lower, it's middle of winter, it's raining, it's cold. And then rather than this potentiation element that I had at the end of the session, I'm going to go, nah, stuff it. Like I'm going to do something at the start of the session that's low intensity that gets their energy up straight away. Rather than sitting on the floor and doing a bunch of mobility drills, we're going to be up on our feet. We're going to do some kind of low intensity that's a bit nicer, kind of fun game. And then in between, we might do a bit of mobility, and then we're going to go straight into our run prep. That kind of skill set as an S&C coach is far more valuable than I feel like most of the physical side of things that we're going to do, because you then influence the mood and the energy, and then you set up the entire session and how successful that's going to be. So I think that's a really good just asterisk next to the whole preparation setup, where you just need to be adaptive on the flow. And even as you're going through your sessions and you're changing things, sometimes you're just going to move some pieces around. And then what do you need to plan for as well? So what's in the actual session plan? What are you preparing for? And then even the actual first drill of the session. So the first drill of the session could be quite low intensity and low energy. So that can be a bit of a thought process about a big pickup and then a drop down and then trying to pick up again. Because that could be session planning. But then it'd even be like, what's the actual drill in itself? So if we've got an intensive day and then the first drill is like line speed in defense, then I'm going to try and have my language and have my setup and have my thought process marry and match up to that. So then when they move across, then there's not as much explaining from the coach. And then as I'm doing my drill, I'll explain what we're doing. All right, we're about to transition over to a D drill. I need you to focus on this, 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 and this. So the physical qualities are down packed, and then the coach can just focus on the tactical side of things. So hopefully that's just a bit of an example in terms of what we kind of want and how we can kind of build out your individual sessions, and just the value of those first 10 to 15 minutes before you start your session can have a massive piece. And just trying to program and create that in its own periodization, that it's not like an injury prevention little block, which is what it can be sold at. It's just more of like a physical development and a physical readiness session, and obviously with all the little individual details like we just spoke about.